Silence swallowed the underground poker room at 3:47 in the morning. The kind of silence that happens when violence walks through a door wearing a torn coat. Nora Morales stumbles through the service entrance, her body bent at an angle that bodies should not bend. She is 27 years old, but the exhaustion carved into her face, the hollowness behind her eyes, makes her look like a woman who has lived 40 years in half the time. Her coat is torn at the shoulder seam, the fabric hanging loose like a flag of surrender. One eye is swollen completely shut, the skin around it turning purple and black like a bruise that has already begun to die. Handprints darken across her throat, 5 fingers on the left side, 4 on the right, the exact shape of hands that had squeezed until the world started turning grey. Blood drips from her split lip. One drop. Then another. The sound of each drop hitting the white marble floor echoes through the room like a metronome counting out her heartbeat. Her hands shake as she grips the doorframe to stay upright. 53 men in the underground poker room freeze. Cigars pause mid-smoke. Cards fall silent on green felt tables. 53 men who have seen violence and money and death in equal measure, and they do not move because something in the way she is bleeding tells them that the order of this night has changed. Aleandro sits at the center table, counting stacks of cash. He is 42 years old and built like a man who was carved from stone and then given a heartbeat as an afterthought. His dark suit is custom-tailored, the fabric a weave that costs more than most people's monthly rent. His white shirt is open at the collar, showing the chest of a man who has nothing left to prove to anyone. A thin scar runs from the corner of his left eye down to his jawline, and the way the light catches it makes him look like he was once split open and then reassembled by someone who knew what they were doing. He does not look up from the money. Not yet. But Marco and Nino, his lieutenants for the last 15 years, move simultaneously. Their hands slip toward the weapons concealed beneath their tailored black jackets. Marco is taller, 6'3", with a thick neck and the kind of face that suggests he has been hit more times than most people have been kissed. Nino is smaller but faster, and his dark eyes move like a predator calculating the angle of attack. Then Nora sees her. In the corner of the room, sitting at a small wooden desk with a box of crayons in front of her, is a 7-year-old girl with dark curling hair. The child is drawing on white paper, her tongue poking out slightly in concentration. She is drawing houses. Simple rectangles with triangular roofs and stick figures standing in front. The girl is Emma. Nora's vision tunnels. Everything else, the men, the cards, the money, the blood still dripping from her lip, all of it falls away. She has protected Emma at the shelter for 2 years. She has held her during nightmares. She has braided her hair before school. She has believed, every single day, that Emma was an orphan with no family left in this broken world. Emma looks up. The child's eyes go wide. Her crayon falls from her small fingers and rolls across the desk. Nora, she whispers. Then she screams. Nora! Nora's body moves on instinct that is older than thought, older than pain, older than the fact that she can barely stand. She crawls forward on hands and knees, and with each movement, blood spreads across the white marble floor like a map of everywhere she has been broken. She does not think about the men watching her. She does not think about the weapons. She thinks only of reaching the child before anything else can reach the child. She collapses between Emma and the rest of the room, her body creating a barrier of bruised flesh and torn clothing. She shields the girl with her arms, her back to the room, completely exposed. Marco's hand tightens on his weapon. Nino takes a step forward. Aleandro rises slowly from his chair. The cash he was counting is abandoned on the table, forgotten, worthless. The scar on his jaw catches the light as he moves, and in the moment he stands, 53 men feel the shift in the air like the moment before a gunshot. He walks toward them. His footsteps are measured and deliberate. Click! 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 Each step sounds like a sentence with no ending. Nora does not turn around. She is whispering to Emma, her voice barely audible. Do not look. Keep your eyes on me. Only on me. Aleandro stops 3 feet away from them. The entire underground poker room is holding its breath. This is the moment that will echo through Seattle's underworld for years to come. This is the moment that will be told in whispers and in warnings. This is the moment that changes everything. But Nora does not know yet. She is still just a woman trying to protect a child. She does not know that Emma Calabrese was stolen 2 years ago in an act of betrayal that nearly destroyed an empire. She does not know that Aleandro has spent 730 days believing his daughter was dead, that he has mourned her in the only way a man like him knows how to mourn, through violence that accomplished nothing. She does not know that in this moment, something in Aleandro Calabrese's chest breaks open and reforms into a shape it has never held before. Drop a like if this story hits you. Share it with someone who needs to hear it and subscribe so you do not miss what is coming tomorrow. Every view and every share helps us continue bringing these stories to the people who need to hear them most. Now, let us go back to the beginning. Let us go back to where everything started. Let us go back to understand how a single mother working double shifts in Seattle became the only person standing between a mafia boss's children and certain death. 10 hours earlier, the rain had not yet started to fall. 10 hours earlier, the rain had not yet started to fall. The blizzard came instead, silent and suffocating, piling snow against the cracked window of Nora Morales' studio apartment in a neighborhood where the streetlights had stopped working 3 years ago. Inside, the darkness was complete except for the single lamp she kept burning on the kitchen table, a lamp that cost $3 at a thrift store and used electricity like a guilty secret she could barely afford. Nora woke at 5 in the morning the way she always did, not because she wanted to, but because her body had learned that sleep was a luxury that could not be sustained. She lay in the dark listening to the wind scratch against the glass, and she did not move. Not yet. Not until she absolutely had to. The studio was so cold she could see her breath. It formed small clouds that disappeared into nothing, just like everything else in her life seemed to do. On the pull-out couch against the far wall, her children slept under donated blankets in shades of blue and gray. Miguel was 9 years old, with his father's dark eyes and his mother's stubborn jaw, curled on his side like he was still protecting himself even in sleep. Sophia was 6, and she had learned to sleep quietly so she would not wake her mother. So she would not be a burden. A 6-year-old girl should not know how to be invisible, but Sophia had mastered it. Nora pulled herself up and moved to the kitchen table. The cold floor bit at her bare feet. She had learned not to wince at cold anymore. Pain without an audience was just practice. The envelope sat where she had left it the night before. She opened it slowly and counted the bills. $34. 34. She counted again because sometimes she had miscounted before, sometimes there had been a miracle hidden in the arithmetic, but there was no miracle this morning. $34 had to last until Friday. 5 days. For 3 people. The grocery store would not accept prayers. The landlord would not accept promises. She sat at the table for 7 minutes, just holding the money. Just looking at it. Then she folded it carefully and put it back in the envelope. The oatmeal was in a plastic bin under the sink. She measured out 2 cups and added 4 cups of water instead of 2, stirring until it was thin and pale. It would stretch. It always stretched. She added no sugar because sugar was not for people like her. She added no cinnamon because cinnamon cost money. She added nothing but time and the pretense that thinned oatmeal could be breakfast, lunch, and dinner for 3 people. At 6:30, she woke the children with her voice, a soft thing like a hand on their shoulders. Miguel rose immediately, already wearing the expression of a child who understood that breakfast was not guaranteed. Sophia opened her eyes slowly, and her first words were not good morning but is it a walking day? It is a walking day, Nora said. The walk to school was 2 miles through the blizzard. Nora had no car because cars required insurance and repairs and fuel, and she had none of those things. She had legs and determination and a daughter who weighed 53 pounds and could not walk through knee-deep snow without her shoes filling with ice. She carried Sophia on her back, her small arms wrapped around Nora's neck, her weight settling into a position that had become muscle memory over years of carrying. Miguel walked beside them, his head down, his sneakers wet and inadequate, his jacket too thin because he had grown 3 inches since last winter and last winter's coat no longer covered his wrists. The snow fell silently. It was beautiful and terrible, and Nora tried not to think about heating bills or the letter that had arrived yesterday in an envelope with a red stamp that said final notice. The letter said she owed $22,000 on her mother's medical bills. Her mother had died 4 years ago. For years, and the debt was still collecting interest like a living thing that would not let go. Nora had not told anyone about the letter. She had hidden it in a book on the highest shelf and decided not to think about it. This was her strategy for most problems: not think, not acknowledge, not let the fear take root where the children could see it growing. She dropped Miguel at his school first, watched him disappear through the doors into a building where at least he would be warm. Then she continued with Sophia to the elementary school 3 blocks away. Sophia did not want to go inside. Sophia clung to her mother's coat and whispered, "Come back soon." "I will come back as soon as the clock tells me to," Nora said. At the upscale Crescent Hotel, where the marble floors gleamed and the chandeliers cost more than Nora's annual salary, she punched in at the restaurant at 7:45 in the morning. She had worked there for 3 years. Her name was barely known by anyone who mattered. She was the woman in the white apron and black pants who appeared when plates needed clearing, when glasses needed refilling, who existed in the spaces between moments of importance. Douglas Hale watched her arrive. Douglas Hale was the restaurant manager, a man in his late 40s with hair slicked back with product that left to shine like oil on water. He wore suits that cost more than her monthly rent, and he wore them like armor, like they might protect him from the knowledge that he was the kind of man who needed armor. He had cologne on him that was expensive and suffocating, a scent that did not mask cruelty but only complicated it. He had been watching her for months. She had felt his attention the way you feel a predator's attention, not as a single moment but as a constant pressure, a weight that did not lift when she left work. He stood in the kitchen entrance as she tied her apron, and he let his eyes travel from her feet to her face in a way that was not glancing but studying. "Inventory. Nora," he said. His voice was like a hand on her shoulder. "Unwanted. Heavy. You look tired." She did not respond. Not responding was safer than responding. Responding gave him language to work with, gave him openings. "You should smile more," he continued. "You are more beautiful when you smile. Your face was made for smiling." She began checking the station assignment on the board. Her hands did not shake. She had trained them not to shake in front of him. He came closer. She smelled his cologne and underneath it something else, something animal and certain of its own power. "After work today, I need you to come to my office. We need to discuss your schedule. Your shift options. Your future here." His words were ordinary. What made them dangerous was the way he said them, the way his future sounded like a threat written in her own tongue. She nodded once and turned away. At the shelter, where Nora volunteered 3 nights a week after her hotel shift, the children arrived in the late afternoon. They came from homes that were broken in different ways, some from abuse, some from neglect, some from poverty so complete that love alone could not feed them. The shelter was a basement room with walls the color of old teeth and windows that showed only the feet of people walking past on the street above. Emma was there. Emma always waited for her. Emma was 7 years old, with dark curls and eyes that held the weight of things a 7-year-old should not have to carry. She had arrived at the shelter 2 years ago in the middle of the night with a social worker who said that the girl's mother could no longer care for her. That was all anyone knew. That was all anyone needed to know. Emma had no family left in the world. Emma was alone the way children are alone, completely and without hope of rescue. She was sitting in the corner with a coloring book when Nora arrived, and the moment she saw Nora, she stood up. She did not run. She walked with the careful steps of a child who had learned that movement draws attention, and attention is not always safe. But when she reached Nora, she held out her hand. In Nora's coat pocket were a pair of red sneakers. They were tiny. Size 5. Nora had found them in the donation bin 2 years ago when Emma first arrived, and she had kept them. They were Emma's first pair of shoes from the shelter, the first thing that was given to her with kindness, the first small way that someone had said you matter, your feet matter, I want to make sure your feet are protected. Emma held the shoes against her chest like they were made of gold. I colored today, Emma said. Colors for sad days. When I feel sad, I look at these colors and it is not so dark. Nora knelt down and looked at the coloring book. Emma had filled every page with reds and oranges and yellows, colors that burned like small fires against the white paper. These are beautiful, Nora said. You made something beautiful today. Emma wrapped her arms around Nora's neck, and Nora felt the girl's small body relax into hers the way bodies relax only when they feel safe. Everyone else leaves, Emma whispered. I do not want Vivi to leave. Vivi was what Emma called her. It was the closest she could come to Nora. It meant Nora was the one. The one who stayed. The one who came back. Nora held her tighter and did not say the things she wanted to say. Did not say that she would never leave. Did not say promises she could not keep. Did not say that the world was full of people who loved their children and lost them anyway, and no amount of love could change that arithmetic. At 10:30 at night, Nora's phone buzzed. A text from Douglas Hale. You forgot to clock out properly today. Come back to the hotel now to fix the timesheet or I cannot pay you for those hours. And you need the money, Nora. I know you do. She read it twice. The threat was not hidden. The threat was very clear. She told Emma goodbye. She told Emma she would be back. She stepped out into the Seattle night where the blizzard had turned the city into something white and suffocating, something without escape, and she walked back toward the Crescent Hotel. The snow fell silently. It covered her footprints almost immediately, erasing evidence that she had ever been there. And in the warm restaurant office of the Crescent Hotel, Douglas Hale was waiting for her. He had been waiting all day. Everything had been arranged. Everything had been planned. What Nora did not know as she walked through that blizzard was that this night would break her open in ways she could not imagine. What Nora did not know was that in exactly 47 minutes, she would choose between her own survival and a child's safety, and that choice would reach the eyes of a man who had spent 2 years believing his daughter was dead. The kitchen door locked behind her with a sound like a coffin lid closing. Nora stood alone in the fluorescent glare of the Crescent Hotel's kitchen at midnight, her breath forming small clouds in the refrigerated air. The blizzard outside had intensified to something almost alive, howling against the industrial windows, and the city beyond had disappeared into white static. Snow accumulated on the glass like a prison building itself around her. Douglas Hale emerged from the shadows between the walk-in freezers. He was a man of 48 years, but cruelty had added a decade to his face. His manager's suit hung on his broad frame, expensive and perfectly tailored, but his eyes held something rotten. Whiskey fumes preceded him like a curse. He smiled, and his teeth were the yellowed ivory of old piano keys. You made a mistake today, Nora. Her back found the industrial sink before she realized she had moved. The stainless steel was cold through her thin uniform. 52 cents in her pocket. That was all she had left until Friday. Her throat tightened. I don't know what you mean, Mr. Hale. I've worked my shift. I need to get home. Home? He laughed, a sound like gravel in a disposal. That apartment with the rotting walls? The one where your children share a bedroom the size of a closet. He stepped closer. I know things about you, Nora. I know you owe the hospital $22,000. $22,000 they want in 7 days, or they file for custody of Sophia. I know your mother is dead. I know your husband is dead. I know nobody is coming to save you. Each word was a weight placed on her chest. She tried to move left, but his arm came up, palm flat against the sink beside her head. The whiskey smell was suffocating. You think you're too good for me, he said. You think you have choices. I need this job, Mr. Hale. I do. But not like this. Let me go. His hand closed around her upper arm, his fingers pressing deep enough to leave marks shaped like hatred. He was stronger than her by 70 pounds, and she felt that mathematics the moment his grip tightened. The kitchen suddenly seemed smaller, the walls closer, the exit impossibly distant. "Then you don't need it at all," he said. When she tried to push past him, his hands found her throat. The first instinct is not to scream. The first instinct is to understand you are dying. Her hands flew to his wrists, nails finding skin, but he was already driving her backward against the counter edge. The impact was a bright star of pain behind her right eye. Her vision tilted. His thumbs pressed deeper into her neck, cutting off the scream before it formed. She couldn't breathe. That was the only thought that remained: no air, no air, no air. Her hand flailed, desperate and wild, and knocked against a knife block on the counter. Her fingers closed around a handle. She didn't think. She slashed upward with everything she had left, and the blade caught his forearm, opening a line of red from wrist to elbow. He roared like an animal and released her. She fell forward, gasping, her lungs burning as they remembered their purpose. Blood trickled from her split lip. Her right eye was swelling, the vision blurring to watercolor. He came at her again, fist raised, face twisted with rage and pain. She held the knife in front of her like a prayer, like a barrier between worlds, and he grabbed her wrist instead, slamming her hand against the wall. The knife fell, clattering on linoleum. He threw her against the walk-in freezer door. Her shoulder screamed. Her rib sang with damage. His fist aimed for her face, but she moved just enough that he hit the metal door instead, and his howl of pain was almost as satisfying as air. Almost. She ran. The hotel corridors were empty at midnight. The blizzard had kept the city indoors. Her footsteps echoed on tile as she pushed through the kitchen doors, past the front desk where the night clerk was absorbed in his phone, and out into the Seattle night where the wind was a living thing with teeth. The snow fell in thick, suffocating sheets. She couldn't see the street signs. The buses had stopped running. The sidewalk was a white river with no banks. Her coat was torn, and the cold found every opening, every gap in the fabric, and poured in like ice water. Her eye was closing. Her lip was opening and closing with each breath, and she tasted copper, salt, her own blood. She walked without direction, just away, just into the white static. Her phone was dead. No one knew where she was. No one was coming. That's when she saw it, the narrow stone staircase descending into darkness, marked by a small brass plaque too old to read clearly. An underground entrance. She had walked past this place 100 times in 2 years, never understanding what lay beneath the street. She had always assumed it was a basement, storage, something empty and forgotten. She had no choice left. She descended into the dark. The stairs were old, worn smooth by decades of footsteps. The temperature rose as she went deeper, and the wind's howl faded to a distant scream. At the bottom, a door. She pushed through. The underground poker room opened before her like a descent into another world. The ceiling was low, made of exposed stone that looked like it had been there since Seattle's founding. Expensive green felt stretched across 3 tables where men in suits counted stacks of cash in the drowsy glow of brass lamps. The air hung thick with cigar smoke and quiet. A crystal decanter caught the light on a mahogany bar. Everything spoke of money, of power, of a world that ran parallel to the one above, hidden from sight. And in the corner, drawing in a sketchbook with colored pencils, sat a child. She was 7 years old, with dark hair and her father's eyes, and she wore a navy dress that cost more than Nora's monthly rent. This was Emma. This was the girl Nora had protected for 2 years at the shelter, the girl she had convinced herself was an orphan, the girl she had loved like a daughter because she had nothing else to love. She was drawing a house with a garden. She was drawing safety. Nora collapsed onto the marble floor. Her vision was going dark at the edges. The blood from her split lip dripped onto cream-colored tile. Her coat, torn and soaked with melting snow, spread around her like a broken wing. She tried to move, tried to shield Emma from whatever came next, but her body would not obey. She had run out of strength. She had run out of options. She had run out of everything except the desperate need to protect one child. Emma screamed. She ran to Nora and threw her small arms around Nora's neck, and Nora pulled her close despite the pain, despite the blood, despite the three men who suddenly looked up from their card games with expressions that would have been comical if the moment had been anything but apocalyptic. Aleandro Calabrese rose from his chair with the slow certainty of a man accustomed to controlling every element of his world. He was 39 years old and had not known gentleness in 20 years. He was 6'2", and his shoulders carried the weight of 214 pounds of muscle built through discipline and rage. His suit was charcoal Armani, his shoes Italian leather that cost more than Nora made in a month, his watch a Rolex that had belonged to his father. A scar ran from his left cheekbone to his jaw, pale and precise as a surgeon's line. His eyes were the grey of a storm sky, and they moved across the scene before him with the calculation of a general surveying a battlefield. Marco and Nino moved forward with hands on their weapons, but Aleandro raised a single hand, and they stopped as if they had struck an invisible wall. "Stop," he said, and his voice was deep and solid like an oath. "Do not move." He walked toward Nora and Emma, his expensive shoes clicking on marble, the sound echoing in the underground room like a countdown. Every step was deliberate. Every movement was controlled. He knelt beside them, and for a moment, he simply looked at the child in Nora's arms. Recognition moved across his face like a door opening onto a room he had sealed shut 3 years ago. "Emma," he whispered, and the name broke something in his voice. "My Emma." Nora tried to speak through her split lip, but only blood and confusion came out. "What?" "No. Emma's parents died. She told me." "My brother Tommaso," Aleandro said, his voice steady now, controlled, speaking the name like a curse. "He betrayed this family. He sold us to the Rossi family 3 years ago, and they took revenge by taking my children. Emma and her twin brother Leo. My son." He paused. "I paid $200,000 in ransom. $200,000 for my children. They sent me Leo. They told me Emma was dead." The words landed like stones in still water, sending out ripples that reached every corner of the underground room. The silence that followed was so complete you could hear the subtle hum of the electrical system, the distant sound of the blizzard, the rapid beating of a child's heart against Nora's battered shoulder. "She's alive," Nora whispered. "She's alive," Aleandro agreed, and for the first time in 3 years, he smiled, and it was not a smile at all but the expression of a man who had just been granted a miracle he no longer believed in. "Because of you." Marco appeared at his elbow, and in his hands was a first aid kit, and in his eyes was something that looked like shock. In 15 years of working for Aleandro Calabrese, he had never seen him like this, vulnerable, almost human, kneeling on marble in front of a bleeding maid and a child as if the entire underground room had not ceased to exist. Aleandro began to clean Nora's wounds with a gentleness that contradicted everything his hands had ever done before. She flinched away, unable to process what was happening. "Why would you help me? I'm nobody." Aleandro met her eyes, and something ancient and protective stirred in his chest, something he had spent 3 years trying to bury. "You protected my daughter when I could not," he said. "You are not nobody." 3 days passed in a blur of impossible choices and whispered prayers that Nora no longer believed would be answered. The hospital released her on Tuesday morning with instructions for wound care and a bill they handed her in a manila envelope. 42 pages. $22,000. Her hands trembled as she stood in the discharge hallway, watching other patients leave with family members who wrapped arms around them, who promised everything would be okay. No one wrapped their arms around Nora Morales. She took the bus home alone, the bandages tight under her clothes, the invoice folded small enough to fit in her coat pocket like evidence of a crime she had not committed. Her apartment was cold when she arrived. The kind of cold that meant the landlord had turned off the heat again, the kind that seeped into your bones and made you understand what it meant to be truly poor in a city built for people who were not. Nora turned on the oven and opened it, standing in front of it with her arms wrapped around herself, feeling the meager warmth spill across her face. This was heating. This was her life now. The phone rang at 2:11 in the afternoon. Her heart stopped. Calls never brought good news anymore. Ms. Morales? This is Pacific Collections. I'm calling regarding your account with St. Mary's Hospital. The voice was professional, cheerful even. I have some extraordinary news. Your account has been paid in full. $22,000. The entire balance cleared this morning. Nora could not speak. Could not breathe. Could not process words that did not make sense in any language she understood. Your account is now zero balance. You have no outstanding debt with our institution. Congratulations. The line went dead. Nora sank onto the kitchen floor, her back against the refrigerator that hummed with the sound of emptiness inside, and she wept. Not tears of relief but tears of confusion so complete they bordered on terror. Money did not simply appear. Money was fought for, counted, rationed, stolen in small ways from the places that would never miss it. Money did not fall from the sky like rain. She did not know that Aleandro had made a single phone call. One word spoken to Marco. One wire transfer executed at midnight. One woman's entire future purchased with the kind of money that meant nothing to him and meant everything to her. But Douglas Hale and Evelyn Blackwell had grown bolder in the days of her absence. Douglas returned to the hotel kitchen on Thursday, his hand wrapped in a bandage he displayed like a battle scar. He told anyone who would listen that Nora had attacked him unprovoked, that she had clawed at his hands, that she was unstable and dangerous. He told the story so many times it began to crystallize into something that resembled truth to people who had not been there, who did not know better, who preferred the story of a man they had worked beside for years over the invisible bruises of a maid they had never bothered to learn the name of. Evelyn sat in her luxury condo on the 42nd floor of a building that overlooked Elliott Bay, and she made a decision that would unmake her entire life. She filed a police report claiming that Nora had stolen $3,000 from the restaurant register. $3,000 that Evelyn herself had embezzled 6 months earlier through falsified receipts. She submitted credit card statements as evidence. She submitted witness statements from line cooks too afraid to contradict her. She submitted herself as a woman of impeccable reputation and unblemished standing. A warrant was issued. The police came to Nora's apartment at 6 in the evening when she was helping Sophia with homework and Miguel was drawing pictures of dinosaurs with broken crayons. There was a knock. The kind of knock that changes everything. 2 officers in uniform, one with a notebook, one with something that looked almost like sympathy in his face. Nora Morales? You're under arrest for theft. You have the right to remain silent. Miguel began to cry. Sophia held onto her mother's leg and would not let go. Nora felt the world tilt at an angle that could not be corrected. She explained she had not stolen anything. The officers listened with the expression of people who had heard this explanation 10,000 times before. She asked if she could call someone. They said she had one phone call. She called the hotel to speak to Evelyn and was disconnected. She had no lawyer. She had no money for a lawyer. She had $34 in her wallet and an eviction notice that had arrived that morning, taped to her front door in a white envelope. They released her the next morning with instructions to appear in court in 7 weeks. 7 weeks to find money for bail. 7 weeks to find money for a lawyer. 7 weeks to find money for anything at all. The door to the police station opened and she walked out into the Friday morning rain, and the rain felt like punishment for crimes she had not committed. By Friday evening, Nora stood on the West Seattle Bridge, and the city lights below looked like promises that would never be kept. The rain fell in sheets, mixing with snow that seemed to be falling upward instead of down, the wind so cold it burned her lungs with every breath. Her coat was soaked through, clinging to her like the skin of something already dead. She had walked from her apartment to here without any clear intention beyond knowing that staying in the apartment meant watching her children sleep and wondering how she could explain that there would be no food Monday morning, no heat Tuesday night, no apartment by Wednesday. The railing was slick with ice. Nora's fingers gripped the cold steel and she looked down at the black water of Elliott Bay and thought very clearly, like a mathematical equation finally making sense, they would be better off without me. The state would place them with a family that had heat. A family with a car. A family with a future. I am the weight that drags them down. She climbed onto the railing. Her feet balanced on metal the width of a hand. One step. Just one step and everything ended. The weight, the fear, the suffocating knowledge that she had failed them, that she could not save them, that every choice she had made had led to this specific moment on this specific bridge in the freezing rain. Her hand went to her coat pocket, a motion so automatic she did not even remember doing it. The red shoes. Emma's first shoes. The child size for feet that had worn them when she was newborn at the shelter, before anyone wanted her, when Emma was simply the forgotten baby in the corner room. Nora had kept them. She had carried them from job to job, from apartment to apartment, all these years, a tiny pair of red shoes that meant nothing to anyone but her. She remembered Emma's face in the poker room. She remembered Emma drawing pictures with her careful hands. She remembered Emma asking if Nora would stay, if Nora would not leave like everyone else left. She remembered Aleandro saying the words like a benediction, "You are not nobody." Nora climbed down from the railing. Her feet touched the bridge again. The rain fell and she walked through it, sobbing so hard she could barely see the path in front of her, her hands clutching the red shoes, and she walked home through the freezing rain because there was still someone who needed her. What changed everything was what happened that same night, at 2:41 in the morning, when Seattle slept and the rain turned to sleet and the temperature dropped to 15 degrees. 12 men in black moved through the downtown hotel like ghosts, like shadows with purpose, like the visible manifestation of a single man's rage. No sirens. No warning. No mercy. Marco led the first team with Nino at his side, their movement synchronized through years of discipline and shared understanding. They moved to the residential tower on the building's east side, to the apartment on floor 8 where Douglas Hale slept beneath Egyptian cotton sheets his salary could never have paid for. The door came off the hinges with a sound like thunder. Douglas woke to a gun against his temple and Nino's face inches from his own, Nino's smile cold enough to freeze blood in veins. "Mr. Calabrese wants a word." What came next was not violence. Violence would have been quicker, cleaner, more merciful. What came next was extraction. Douglas Hale was lifted from his bed still in his pajamas, still confused about which nightmare he was living in, and carried into the darkness. He began to beg before they even left the apartment. He promised things he could not deliver. He mentioned his mortgage. He mentioned his reputation. He trembled like a cornered animal backed into a corner with no exit and no hope and no mercy left in the world. Across the city, in a luxury condo on the 42nd floor of a glass and steel tower, Evelyn Blackwell woke to find a man sitting in her living room in the darkness. Aleandro Calabrese occupied her couch like a judge occupying a bench, his silhouette backlit by the city lights behind him, his hands folded in his lap with the patience of someone who had already decided your fate and was simply waiting for you to catch up. She reached for her phone. Marco crushed it under his heel with deliberate slowness, metal and glass splintering against polished concrete. Aleandro spoke, and his voice was not loud but it filled every space in the room and every space in her body. "You broke something that belonged to me. Now I break everything that belongs to you." Evelyn tried to bluff because bluffing was all she had ever done. She spoke about lawyers. She spoke about connections. She spoke about the power of her family name. She spoke about things that meant nothing at all. Aleandro slid a folder across her glass coffee table. Inside were documents dating back 8 months. Tax evasion, the first pages detailed. Wire fraud, the next section explained. Theft from 47 employees over 6 years, the spreadsheets documented in perfect digital clarity. The FBI had been watching her since January. They had been waiting for sufficient evidence. Aleandro had provided them with everything they needed, every receipt, every conversation, every trace of her crimes catalogued and organized like a prosecution gift wrapped in a red bow. At dawn, federal agents moved through the hotel and through her building simultaneously. There were cameras. There were news vans. There was Evelyn Blackwell in handcuffs, her face shocked, her perfect reputation collapsing like a building imploding into itself. Douglas Hale faced charges for assault, for theft, for racketeering. 12 years in federal prison. His mugshot would become a standard reference image for predators in corporate environments. His children would grow up knowing what their father had done. His wife would file for divorce within weeks. Evelyn Blackwell faced charges for organized fraud and conspiracy. 40 years. 40 years of cells and steel, and the knowledge that every choice she had made had led to this specific moment in a federal courtroom wearing an orange jumpsuit 2 sizes too large. Their faces were on every news channel in Seattle by lunch. Their families began to disown them by evening. Every asset was seized by the federal government. The hotel released simultaneous statements announcing their terminations, detailing their crimes with surgical precision. Systematic destruction. Not through violence but through justice. Not through death but through the slow, methodical dismantling of everything they had built on the backs of people they had treated as invisible. But what Nora did not know was that the real test was still coming. For months after the knife attack, Seattle's spring rain had finally stopped. The city exhaled, and with it, something in Nora Morales exhaled too. The scars on her forearm caught the light when she moved, thin white lines that traced from wrist to shoulder like a map of the moment she chose to bleed for 2 children who were not hers by blood but had become hers by choice. She stood in the kitchen of her new apartment, smaller than the old one but purchased with money she had earned herself, and she pressed her palm flat against the cool granite countertop. 3 years ago, she had owned nothing. $34 in a torn wallet. 2 children who depended on her to be stronger than she was. A job that paid her to be invisible. Now she had health insurance. Real pay. A lease with her name on it. But the most dangerous thing in her life was not what she had escaped. It was what she was still learning to accept. Aleandro Calabrese had visited every week since the hospital released her. He brought Emma and Leo, always with an excuse, paperwork that needed reviewing, restaurants that needed auditing, the children demanding to see Miguel and Sophia. Marco and Nino had stopped pretending surprise when they found him sitting on a folding chair in her small living room, watching their boss become someone neither had recognized 3 years ago. Tonight, he came alone. The knock came at 8 in the evening, soft, almost hesitant. When Nora opened the door, he stood in the hallway holding daisies. Simple white daisies, not roses. He had learned she preferred simple things. He had learned many things about her over 4 months, that she took her coffee without sugar, that she hummed while working, that her hands trembled slightly when she was afraid but not when she was strong. It was only when she was trying to be brave that they shook. "The children are with Marco and Nino tonight," he said. His voice carried the weight of a confession. "I know." She had arranged it. She had known this was coming the way a person knows when a storm is approaching, through the pressure in the air, the way the light changes, the electricity that builds before lightning finds its target. He stepped inside. The apartment was modest. Nothing like the marble and mahogany spaces where he usually moved. But it was hers, and that made it the most valuable building in all of Seattle. She had polished the windows herself. The furniture was second-hand but clean. Books lined a shelf above the couch, most of them children's books, but tucked among them were novels she read late at night when the city slept. He noticed everything. They moved to the small balcony. The city sprawled below them, towers catching the last golden light of evening, the Space Needle like a needle threading through clouds. The rain had scrubbed the air clean. Everything smelled like wet concrete and spring. Aleandro set the daisies on the railing. He did not look at her yet. 3 years ago, he began, and his voice sounded like a man standing at the edge of a cliff. "My brother betrayed me. He broke an oath that should have been unbreakable. I decided that day that mercy was another word for weakness. I built walls so high that nothing could touch me. No one came close. Not in 15 years. He paused. The city hummed below them, cars passing on the street, the distant sound of a siren cutting through the evening. Then you stumbled through a door bleeding and broken, and everything I had decided about the world stopped being true. Nora stood motionless. She could feel her heartbeat in her throat. You protected my daughter when you had every reason to protect only yourself. You took a knife for my children when you barely knew them. Emma and Leo would not exist in my life if you had not chosen to bleed. You rebuilt your life from nothing, and you refused to let me do it for you. You stand as my equal now, Nora Morales. Not beneath me. Not dependent on me. Equal. His voice dropped lower. And he turned to face her fully, and in his dark eyes was something that looked like surrender. I love you. I have loved you since that first night when you crawled across my floor to shield a child who was not even yours. Nora's breath caught. Her hands began to tremble. I'm a maid who took a knife for your children, she whispered. What am I supposed to say to that? Aleandro smiled, and it transformed his face from stone to something living, something that could still learn how to feel. Say yes. She stepped forward and kissed him. It was not gentle. It was the kiss of a woman who had learned to be strong, who had learned to love without losing herself, who had learned that the most dangerous man in Seattle was far less terrifying than the man who could break her by simply asking her to believe in a future. When they separated, Aleandro pulled a small velvet box from his pocket. Inside was a ring, not ostentatious, not designed to announce wealth, but designed with care. A single diamond set in white gold, and around it, engraved in letters so small you had to look closely to see them, were the words stronger than you think. Marry me, he said. It was not a question. Yes, she answered. And this time it was a promise. 6 months later, the shelter where Nora had first found Emma, abandoned, hungry, forgotten by a world that did not value her, opened its doors fully funded. The Morales Calabrese Foundation, the brass plaque read, though Nora insisted on keeping her name first. Aleandro had wanted to name it after him. She refused. This building was built on her sacrifice, not on his money. Emma and Leo played in the garden with Miguel and Sofia. The 4 children moved like a unit now, inseparable. Emma no longer had the hollow look of an abandoned child. Leo laughed without fear. Miguel and Sofia had lost the tension they carried in their shoulders, the readiness to flinch at any unexpected sound. Nora wore Emma's first pair of shoes on a chain around her neck. Red shoes, tiny, the kind that a 7-year-old could no longer fit into. She had kept them for 3 years, carried them through every hardship, held them when she wanted to give up. Now they hung against her heart, visible proof that one small act of protection had led to everything. Aleandro watched her from the doorway. Marco and Nino stood beside him, 2 men who had spent 15 years in the presence of the most dangerous creature in an empire of dangerous creatures, and who were now witnessing something they never expected to see. Who knew, Nino whispered, that a single mother with $34 in her pocket would bring down the most powerful man in Seattle? Marco smiled. She did not bring him down. She brought him back. That evening, after the children slept in rooms with doors that locked from the inside because safety was the first gift Nora insisted on giving them, Nora sat at her desk and wrote a letter. It was not addressed to Aleandro. It was addressed to the children, Miguel, Sofia, Emma, and Leo, her 4 reasons for being alive. She wrote, I want you to remember that protection is not weakness. Love is not surrender. And the strongest thing you will ever do is shield someone else when you are barely standing yourself. The world will try to break you. Let it try. Because the storm will pass, and you are far stronger than you think. She sealed the letter and placed it in an envelope. Someday, when they were old enough to understand, they would read it. They would know that she had written it not as instruction but as testimony. As proof that survival was not just about enduring. It was about choosing, every single day, to turn your wounds into wisdom and your pain into purpose. Outside, Seattle's rain began again, soft and gentle, the kind that feeds gardens instead of drowning them. And in a city where power was measured in money and violence, one woman had measured it differently. And won. If this story touched your heart, please subscribe to the channel, like and share this video with the people you love. Every comment you leave is a precious source of motivation. We wish all of you good health, a joyful life, and days filled with peace.